and fail back because it wasn't accurate. And then
Yeah.
as I tried to do that, it went down a rat hole of nobody could agree as to what the right answer was, and it never got finished.
Well, that was a lot of the trouble with the replication stuff was at one point we shipped it with, yeah, you can replicate, but then when you want to clean everything up after, do failback, it's like an exercise for the admin, which kind of a nightmare. But I think some work's been done in that area more recently. But
Okay.
I don't know. Cool.
I remember the days where there'd be people standing up and yelling that this needs to be working.
Yeah, well, that's a nice feature. And would have been great if we finished it a long time ago.
Well, don't a lot of people just do it on the back end?
I don't know. We'll do it, I guess. I don't know.
But the 3-part does. It does it on the back end, but you still have to configure it at the front end and have it fail over and over.
Yeah.
That's the hard shit.
That's like the core of our support businesses. All the customers out prevent it. In this case, like our product really doesn't do active. Yeah, then because now you need core on critical policy.
Okay. So it doesn't sound like we have anything more to discuss there.
No, not really.
Is there, like, action items we want to take out of this?
Remove replication.
I don't think that's where we are for now. I think we really
Get off my lawn.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I don't think we can remove replication. Especially after everything that went into trying to get it in.
All of those people are to support it.
This is true. Well, I'm going to pick on Eric again. Yay! Capabilities reporting.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that thing.
And well, Walt's still here since.
Oh, that shit.
I mean, I haven't really looked at it in the last while, so
Okay.
don't really have anything to talk about.
Was there anything? Has anyone done anything with that?
Well, so we had.
Well, everybody in
Guy was
Denver said don't do anything. It's fine. So I didn't do anything.
Yeah, there was an API
What?
that you can implement today. The
Daytera.
driver
And he was.
had an example of how they're reporting it.
They had an
official-
example of they have an example of a thing that is related to capabilities
The
that
problem.
works for what they want to do with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't solve what I was originally going after, but I decided that I was going to worry about this later after apparently everyone hating everything about it. So I don't know.
So the Daytera, they then tried to. Their CI died, and they tried to push up a refactoring patch that was basically a rewrite, and Sean said no, and now Matt's completely disappeared. I don't even know if he's at Daytera anymore.
I think I missed that whole thing.
Why did he say no to the refactor?
Because
the CI was down?
partially because the CI was down, and partially because he wouldn't split it into smaller patches. He just said no.
He's been saying that a lot.
Anyway, I went and I looked at it and said, well, this
So-
kind of sucks, and then we got in an argument, and I moved on. So
Capability stuff, I mean,
we'll talk about it.
Daytera solved a problem. They didn't solve the problem that I was actually interested in, but I was the only person interested in the problem that I was actually interested in Denver. So I kind of just haven't even looked at it lately.
So can you explain what you want out of it and how that was done?
Well, what I was aiming at was being able to just go up to an openstack-cinder installation and say, tell me what extra specs are meaningful to this particular running instance of this thing,
Yeah,
so that I can go make volume types that do things that are interesting.
and I don't understand why we can't make that happen.
We could very easily make it happen. People just don't want to make it happen for some reason.
So that was originally what I wanted out of it as well 4 or 5 years ago.
It's a very obvious feature to me that we
Yes.
should do. But I've talked about this in Denver, and everybody was running around sideways talking about things that were kind of related to this, but not really the same thing. And the Daytera thing, they implemented something that does something useful for them, but it doesn't actually address this. And it addressed something tangentially related to capability stuff. And I was kind of sitting there promoting this idea. Pretty much the whole room kind of sat there. 1 or 2 people were just arguing against it. And I was kind of like, well, I don't know.
I mean, it's ridiculous that our whole system is built around volume types.
Well, and people
You need
also
to understand capabilities to use the volume types, and we have no good way to find out what capabilities are relevant.
and people get too obsessed with the code that we already have. We have this code where you can say, I can't remember what the command is off the top of my head, but you can
List
say
capabilities.
list capabilities, and it will list some capabilities which are utterly irrelevant to your cloud.
Yes.
And we agreed in the PTG before the last one that we should change that. And then I showed up and said we should change it, and everybody didn't want to change it the second time around. So I don't know. It seems to me like there's a very clear design for how this could work that makes a lot of sense.
I
But-
actually had that in place.
But nobody was interested in it in the Denver PTG at all. So
Well, I think we had a couple of people derailing it into a different discussion. Maybe I failed there to guide the
Yeah.
discussion appropriately.
yeah,
Meh.
So I'm on board with you. I mean, because I originally had, I'm sure we've had the same discussion every time we talked about this. I had a whole team, and even in Horizon, that was driving this, and I was guiding them on
well,
how
then,
to
and that's
make
another.
this work end to end,
Yeah.
such that when you created a volume type, you can do a drop down, you can see everything, and
Right.
not only could you see the keys, but an explanation of what it meant and all of that, and I even had validation built into it too,
And it's
which
not.
it just
And
seems
to be fair,
make sense.
I don't think I've reviewed what you did back then in the last couple of years, but
It's
Well,
been a
but
while.
the
a
reason
lot
that
of it-
got torpedoed goes back to the whole argument we had in Austin about, okay, then what capabilities should be default supported by
We had
everybody
that-
and not?
we had
was
that
so
argument a
stupid.
bunch of times, and it was an idiotic argument because the basis of that argument was always, I want all the backends in Cinder to look the same, which has never made sense, and it's
No,
not how
It's not
Cinder
even
works.
possible.
And the whole freaking reason that you would do this is to make it more usable,
Yes.
accounting for the fact that they're not all the same.
Yes.
That's the whole point of this feature. But we spent multiple years getting derailed by the theory that all Cinder backends should be identical and never accomplishing this kind of stuff that we could have done 5 years ago if we had
Yeah.
actually thought about it.
Mhm.
So now that we can actually think about it and do this stuff, I think we probably should.
I think we should too. I would like to resurrect that stuff that I had way back when.
Well, and I wrote up a whole new detailed spec proposing how I was going to do it too,
Okay.
which is probably fairly similar to
It's
to
going to be
that.
similar. I wanted the driver to report
right.
what it could do, describe some of the possible values for some of the keys that they have, some help text associated with it,
Yeah.
as well as provide a standardized API mechanism for doing
Well,
validation.
and that's the fundamental part of it is that drivers report it and then there's an API to see it. That's really like the guts
That's
of what it
the
is.
guts of it, yes.
Because I think basically I went and designed the same thing that you had designed a couple years before is probably what happened.
Yeah, that was what happened. You put spec together, and then we were reviewing it at the forum, and Walt went, "Wait,
Yeah.
I've done this
Already done
before."
this.
Yeah. But I don't know of any reason
We should just
that we should
do
not do this. I mean, it seems like a very obvious thing that would help admins. Like,
The to-do would be to resolve the specs.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the last time we talked about this at the PTG, it was just constant objections about this and that and unrelated discussions. And like, I kind of left and was just like, whatever. I'm not going to worry about it for now because I didn't know what else to do with it at that point.
Well, the people that are objecting to it aren't here anymore, so
Yeah.
I'm saying, if we have the cycles to do it, we should do it and do it the way we want to do it because we're the ones who are contributing now.
Yeah.
So, one of the biggest problems that I've always had with volume types is that you can create a volume type and it can have anything in it, but you don't know if it's going to work until you go try and create the first damn volume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that seems ridiculous.
And you
then-
still
then-
don't know if it's actually doing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then half the time you just get back a, no host found, and it's like, what? Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I still don't understand the syntax, the brackets in.
I really wish we hadn't have done that. That was
Why?
I don't know why anybody did that because that kills me every time I look at like the thin provisioning and stuff with like the bracket is true instead of
Yeah. All of that was to get the scheduler to ignore some of it. Pass it through.
I don't know. It's very
Which-
weird.
There's arguments for having that because the scheduler will just fail to find a back end, basically, if it doesn't know how to interpret those values.
Oh,
There's no hooks into the driver itself to say, hey, yeah, I can understand that one and resolve that, and here's a host that I can actually
yeah.
allow you to provision against me because I understand this foobar blah key, which nobody else does. I think that was kind of the crux of where that came from. But a lot of that can be resolved with having upfront validation done
Right.
on the drivers that want to support, hey, if you provide me with an HPE key,
Well, yeah, because there's
You
a
know.
bunch of drivers that take a bunch of key values for setting up various things on the back end.
and you don't know if those are going to work
Right.
at all
Yeah.
until you actually try it, and maybe you just mistype the value.
Yeah.
When in fact you could have checked that up front when you're creating the volume type and said, hey driver, since you're running,
Yeah.
is this a valid value for that key on your back end? And then you go to the back end and say, oh yeah, that pool name actually exists, or that feature is enabled, or not enabled. Oh crap, you can't use that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was the real crux of why I wanted to get something like this put into place. It was basically for that validation.
Yeah. Well, and it's a huge usability thing. And I think somebody tried to address the usability thing with this list capabilities command in the client, but it just doesn't work because it doesn't do the right thing.
Unfortunately, I have zero time to actually
Yeah.
work on that.
Well, this is something that I don't have like product this, but it's just something that I think would be good to do. And,
I
I mean, I can work on it here and there as a background thing. Just
So do we need to go back to the old specs and look at them?
I mean, we should read. I don't know. I
It
mean,
might be worth
we
reading
should read
those and
Walt's
then
and mine and see.
combine them
You know,
together and
Okay.
make everybody happy.
maybe there's some stuff that's in Walt's that I didn't think of in my more recent one, and I don't know if we can go evaluate what's out there.
Oh, and I don't think we want to make everybody happy. I'm sorry, because we'll never get this in place if we make everybody happy.
Well, I
You
think
know,
I really
we had a
just-
good usability case.
I really did.
Drop down in Horizon, so that you can create volume types right out of there.
Yeah.
So you need description, need some way to validate.
We had all of that described really well. We even had a way to define, the different types, because sometimes a key takes a string, sometimes it has an enum. You can only select these.
Right.
So
Well,
we even went into
half
that
of the-
detail.
Half the problem with the discussion in Denver was just understanding. Like, I spelled out in the spec, this is the use case, and then we spent the whole time talking about like different use cases. And that was kind of the tricky part, is just getting people to agree, like, what the heck the point of this be.
But fundamentally, it seemed very simple.
It does seem so. It's not technically hard to do. You just gotta. It's just a philosophical argument. But I didn't think it would be very controversial. It's not. It's not like crazy stuff.
No, it's just a usability problem.
Yeah.
That's really what we're trying to solve.
Yeah, and having something there would be better than nothing. Or what we
Well, what we
currently
have now is not nothing.
It's
What we
a
have now
nightmare.
is stuff that's wrong.
Yeah,
Because if you run
Yes.
the command now, it tells you things like compression that don't even apply to the cloud you're running the command against. So,
I mean, our drivers are all reporting some set of capabilities. They have to, right?
For
well,
the scheduler itself,
Yeah,
but that's
but
not
they don't keep track of all these extra keys and stuff that they look at.
right. None of that stuff is being exposed, and my argument, and this is where we started to get bogged down, was that they wanted everything to be put into the get volume stats to report up through the scheduler. When my original approach was to not put it there because it has nothing to do with that at all.
Well, yeah, and I think
And that's when Winston said, well, you need to call the scheduler API and dump out this big, giant conglomeration of nonsense up to Horizon. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. When in
Yeah.
fact, I really just wanted to have a separate method API that you could implement that reports what this version in the back end supports, and
right.
the list of possible key values, their mins and maxes, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then have some validation methods that allow you to actually call that from when you're actually creating. And have nothing to do with the scheduler, nothing to do with get volume stats, none of that shit.
Yeah, it's really
because-
just about retrieving the information out of the driver
Yes,
and giving it to somebody.
absolutely. This is not a scheduler issue. This is
Yeah.
not something. I think everyone tried to get way too smart about this and reuse this for multiple things, and that's when we started arguing about the use case of it.
Yeah.
And what I was just sitting here back going, this is just a usability thing.
Yeah.
This is not hey, let's reuse this information for making all the drivers report what they can or can't do, and that way the scheduler can make decisions on it. And
Yeah.
that's when I
I
just
mean,
kinda
all
said,
that might be worth looking into as separate efforts, but it's a different thing.
yes. For me, it was very straightforward. We had defined like maybe 3 new API calls into the driver itself that allows you to fetch what the driver can do.
Yeah.
And then if the driver wanted to do validation, they would implement that method, and that was it.
Well, Walt and I are in vehement agreement on all this.
Okay, good. Good. I think it would be one of the best features that we could add to Cinder in a very long time, usability-wise.
Yeah, Well, Cinder got hamstrung for years on the philosophy of a small number of people who were obsessed with not wanting different drivers to look different and not wanting different deployments to look different. And so the people kept trying to hammer everything into APIs that were supposedly going to be identical everywhere. And it fundamentally has just never fit with what Cinder actually is, because you have to take an unrealistic view of what it is we're building for that to actually like compute.
It's held Cinder back for years,
It
even though the
has.
people who were pounding on that.
Yeah,
The lowest common denominators.
yeah. Because we were having arguments about this stuff in like Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yep.
Yeah, that's when I had the proposal up, and I actually had working code and demonstration for Verizon all the way to Cinder saying, this is what we can do.
Yeah.
And everyone said no, because we have to make all the drivers report the same keys and mean the same values, and it's just like,
Yep,
no.
and then it came up again in Austin, and we had a huge fight.
Well, and there was kind of a FUD thing that kept happening with this idea that there was never enough commonality between different drivers for any of this to actually work, which is not true, because
It's not true.
there is enough commonality to do stuff with this. But yeah, I was frustrated with the way this was going for years too, because it just, some people got stuck in a real particular philosophy that just was not productive.
Yeah.
Water color. Okay.
So I would love to help out with this, but right now I think my priority is, my company work on the set Ansible plugin and
Yeah, and
that stuff.
I agree that that's the priority there. I think the iSCSI driver has,
I would like to get that done.
yeah.
And once I can get that published, then maybe I can help out Cody with some of the stuff. But I actually had patches that implemented all this stuff way back when. And maybe we can look at that as a starting point and say, oh, this is garbage, doesn't work anymore, or, I don't care. The end result is I would love to have in place. Because I'm sure your customers would love it. I know my customers would love it to
I
have
would assume so.
an easy way to, oh, wow, these are the drivers that are actually running right now. And
Because the only way to figure that out is really to go read the driver code.
yeah,
Cause
it's
Or
ridiculous.
hope that they've documented it.
but there's not even really any central place that happens.
Yeah, finding that documentation and reading through
There
it.
might be documentation at each storage vendor in some
Yeah.
manual, but there's not a Cinder document that explains that.
And the cool thing is that if we had these APIs that reported this stuff, we can generate documentation based on it.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So there's no current way that we could do that with the existing code. There's nothing. It's not.
Well, there's no structured
Consistent,
way to get
okay.
any of this info. There's just a bunch of code that says if this key shows up that says this, then do X. And that's a lot of what this is
Yeah.
establishing some driver API that actually lets us get this info.
That's the part that always kind of boggled my mind about the volume type stuff, is that everyone argued over making sure the keys were the same for all drivers, when the whole point of volume types is you can put anything you wanted in there, and if the driver used it, he used it. If it didn't, it didn't. Who cares?
Yeah.
So what it's called?
Extra specs. I mean, that's why they called it that, right?
Yeah.
It's extra info.
Yeah.
Yeah, every time I get
pisses
into
me off
I know
every time we talk about
every
it.
time I get into this, it's just 6 years of annoyance that comes back.
Yeah, there's a lot of history there.
I can make it exciting again and go, no, all drivers need to look the same.
Yeah.
It's not the same without us arguing and have passionate, we're all in vehement agreement on things. It's just we don't have anybody to get it done.
I know. That's the problem now. We can do whatever we want, but we don't have the time to do it.
Makes me want to cry. Anyway,
Anyone else that wants to take this up and run with it, I'd say, yeah, let's do this.
delegate to the new guy. You got two things to work on now, EJ.
SQL Olympic and the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fix them.
Yeah, this would be an
I'll look at
awesome
it.
feature.
Send me this stuff.
The PT, I think we had links to all of my reviews, the old reviews.
Okay.
Somewhere in the PTG. I know we had listed all of those because it had all of the Horizon pad changes, the API
Oh,
changes,
it was in the
driver
forum,
changes.
I think. I have the notes from
Oh
Denver.
yeah, there was a forum thing too. Wasn't
Yeah, that was where we had the aha moments.
Still have access to some of those. I've worked with them at HP and now they're
How is Horizon doing as far as bandwidth? Do they have engineers that are doing things?
I talked with some of my guys and they said, it would be easy to become a Horizon core right now just because they're desperately seeking people out, but the
Yvonne
code
is
base
still doing
is
some stuff there, right?
He's still the PTO.
How is he?
Yeah, my understanding is that the code base, they still haven't switched over to whatever JavaScript framework that they were going to switch over to, and they hadn't completed that.
They got me so deep.
Which one were they going to go to? I don't know. I'm not a JavaScript guy anyway.
I used to. Yes, it was some new whiz-bang thing like 3 or 4 years ago. And
So it's probably really old and crappy now.
Yeah, it's probably crap now. Yeah. So nobody really wants to work on it.
Well, I think that's been a very understaffed project for a long time. That's the impression I get. I mean, I think there's still a couple people at Red Hat that are doing something there, but I don't know much.
Okay.
Schedule says we gotta go to lunch now.
Yeah. So I can tell you guys need food by the increased crabbiness. Was there anything else you need to cover before you go?
I don't think so. Covered the majority of things that I wanted. That's best.
Okay. So we'll break for lunch, be back at 2:30, hopefully, and reconvene then, minus a Walt.
Sorry, guys.
That's okay. We're glad you're able to be here as long as you have been. So,
Yeah, it's been good.
all right, cool. Thanks, guys. We'll be back in an hour and a half.